My boyfriend's father called me street trash at dinner, and what I did next shocked everyone. Stay with me till the end of my story, and if it makes you feel something, don't forget to show some love by subscribing, liking, and sharing it with the people close to you. My name is Leah. I'm 25 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've worked hard for everything I have. I didn't grow up with much, my parents did their best, but money was always tight. That's why I learned early how to be independent. I worked part-time jobs through school, saved up, and eventually found my passion in event planning. I may not live a life of luxury, but I've built a career I'm proud of and a life where I don't depend on anyone else. For the past 2 years, I've been dating Joseph. He's 28, handsome, charming, and in many ways the opposite of me. He grew up in a wealthy family, the kind of family that vacations in Europe every summer and cares about brand names and appearances. Joseph never made me feel less for not having those things, and I loved that about him. But deep down, I always knew his parents looked at me differently. His father, Richard, especially, never tried to hide his opinion. Richard is a powerful businessman, the type of man who walks into a room and expects everyone to fall silent. To him, money and reputation mean everything. The few times I'd met him, he barely looked at me, and when he did, there was this coldness in his eyes, like he had already decided I wasn't good enough for his son. His wife, Diana, was polite but distant, like she didn't dare go against her husband's judgment. Still, Joseph always said his father just needed time. He insisted that Richard would eventually see how serious we were and respect me for who I am. So when Joseph told me his family was hosting a formal dinner and wanted me to come, I knew it wasn't just another meal. Joseph said, "This is it, Leah. This is where Dad finally sees you for the amazing woman you are." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to walk into that house, sit at their table, and show them that I was more than my background. I wasn't trying to impress them with money or fancy connections. I just wanted them to see my worth as a person. Still, the nerves were heavy. I remember standing in front of the mirror before leaving, adjusting my dress again and again. It wasn't designer, but it was simple, elegant, and me. I practiced my smile, reminding myself to stay calm, to be respectful, to keep conversations light. Deep inside, though, I worried it wouldn't matter what I said or how I acted. That night, as Joseph drove us to his parents' home, he held my hand and said, "Trust me, everything's going to be fine." I nodded, forcing a smile, but my stomach tightened. Something told me this dinner was going to change everything. The night of the dinner, my hands shook as Joseph, and I walked up to his parents' front door. Their house looked more like a mansion than a home, with spotless glass windows, glowing lights, and perfectly trimmed hedges. I took a deep breath, adjusted the strap of my simple black dress, and reminded myself that I belonged there just as much as anyone else. Inside, everything gleamed. A chandelier sparkled above the dining room, and the long table was already set with polished silverware and glasses that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Diana, Joseph's mother, greeted us politely, but her smile felt forced, like she was trying to keep the peace. Richard didn't even bother standing to welcome me. He simply gave a nod and went back to pouring himself a glass of wine. I kept my smile steady and followed Joseph to the table. When dinner began, I tried to make small talk, asking Diana about the flowers on the table and complimenting the meal. She responded kindly but quickly turned quiet whenever Richard jumped in. He led every conversation back to his business, his company, his achievement. His voice carried through the room, drowning out everyone else. I tried to join in. When he spoke about a recent project, I asked a question, showing genuine interest. He looked at me briefly, then turned his attention back to Joseph as if I hadn't spoken. I swallowed my embarrassment and tried again later, telling a light-hearted story about planning an outdoor wedding that almost got ruined by rain. Joseph chuckled, Diana smiled faintly, but Richard cut in with a sharp laugh. "Event planning," he said, swirling his glass. "Cute. A hobby more than a real career." My cheeks warmed, but I forced myself to stay composed. "It's demanding work," I replied softly. "I love what I do. It means a lot to help people celebrate the important moments in their lives." Richard leaned back in his chair, smirking. "That's nice. But some of us come from real families, with real businesses. Not everyone is cut out for that kind of life, I suppose." The air tightened. I felt Joseph shift beside me, but he didn't say anything. Diana lowered her eyes to her plate. I tried to brush off the comment, telling myself to stay calm, but the words stung. I grew up with parents who worked hard every single day to provide for me. Maybe we didn't have riches, but we had love. To Richard, that clearly meant nothing. I took a sip of water, hoping the tension would fade, but it didn't. The more I tried to contribute, the more Richard found ways to belittle me. He made offhand remarks about knowing your place, about women who don't understand tradition, and about upbringings that don't prepare you for society. Finally, The breaking point came when Diana asked me a gentle question about my childhood. I smiled and shared a small memory about how my dad used to fix cars in our driveway, teaching me the value of hard work. Richard's face twisted into a mocking grin. He leaned forward and said loudly, "So that explains it. No wonder you act the way you do. You're nothing but street trash." The room went still. My fork slipped from my hand and clattered against the plate. My chest tightened as the words sank in, heavy and cruel. I looked around. Diana's lips pressed tightly together. Joseph froze with his mouth slightly open, and Richard sat back smugly, as if proud of the blow he had just landed. My heart pounded. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I felt exposed, humiliated, and small. But above all, I felt the cold truth. Richard wanted me to break, and he thought he had won. The moment Richard's words hit me, I turned to Joseph, praying he would finally speak up. I needed him to be the man who once told me I was enough, the man who swore he loved me for who I was. My eyes searched his face, begging him silently to defend me, to stop his father's cruelty before it crushed me completely. But instead of stepping in, Joseph let out this awkward little laugh. He scratched the back of his neck and muttered, "Dad, come on, she's trying." His tone wasn't protective, it was dismissive, almost apologetic to his father, as if I were the problem. The sound of those words cut deeper than anything Richard had said. My chest tightened, and I felt the air leave my lungs. Joseph wasn't standing by me. He was standing with them. Suddenly, every little moment of tension I had brushed aside. The times Richard ignored me, the subtle digs at my job, the cold stares at family gathering, came rushing back. And I realized Joseph had never once challenged his parents for me. Not once. I tried to swallow down the sting, but my throat burned. I glanced at Diana, hoping maybe she would say something, that she would at least acknowledge how cruel her husband had been. But she sat perfectly still, her fork resting untouched, her eyes lowered to her plate. She shifted slightly in her chair, discomfort clear in her body language, but not a single word left her lip. It was like she had trained herself to disappear whenever Richard decided to wield his power. The silence stretched. My humiliation grew heavier with every second no one spoke up for me. My palms were clammy, and I could feel tears threatening to spill. But I refused to let Richard see me break at that table. Not in front of him. Not when he looked so smug, so certain he had put me in my place. I forced my chair back quietly and stood. "Excuse me," I whispered, my voice barely steady. No one stopped me. No one even moved as I walked away. Inside the bathroom, I locked the door and leaned against the sink, gripping the porcelain so hard my knuckles turned white. The tears came then, hot and fast, burning down my cheeks. I looked at myself in the mirror, my carefully done hair, my elegant dress, my painted smile that had vanished completely, and I hated how small I felt. For a few minutes, I let myself cry. I let the ache in my chest have its way, because pretending to be strong in front of them had nearly broken me. But as the sobs quieted, something shifted. I wiped my face with a tissue, stared into my own eyes in the mirror, and whispered, "No more." I wasn't going to let Richard decide my worth. And I wasn't going to keep standing beside a man who couldn't even defend me when his father called me trash. That night, in that bathroom, I promised myself something. They could look down on me, they could laugh at me, they could even try to shame me, but I would never again sit silently and accept it. The car ride home felt heavier than stone. Neither of us spoke at first. Joseph kept his eyes on the road, hands gripping the wheel, while I sat stiffly in the passenger seat, staring out at the blur of city lights. My chest was still tight from what had happened at the table, but now it wasn't just Richard's words echoing in my head. It was Joseph's silence. When we finally parked outside my apartment, I turned to him. My voice was calm, though my heart pounded. "Joseph, do you realize how much your dad hurt me tonight? He called me trash in front of everyone, and you didn't stand up for me." He let out a sigh, as if I were being dramatic. "Leah, that's just how Dad is. He's blunt, he says what he thinks. You can't take it so personally." I blinked at him, stunned. "Not take it personally? He insulted who I am, where I come from, and you laughed it off like it was nothing. Do you know how humiliating that was for me?" Joseph shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tightening. "Look, I know he can be rough, but he doesn't mean it the way you think. He's old-fashioned, okay? He just values certain things." His words felt like another slap. Old-fashioned? No, Richard had been cruel on purpose, and Joseph was more worried about defending his father's behavior than protecting. For the first time in 2 years, I saw it clearly. Joseph would never choose me over his family. In his world, Richard's approval mattered more than my dignity. I took a slow breath, steadying myself. "I need you to understand something. If we're going to build a life together, I need to know you'll have my back. Tonight, you didn't. You left me alone while your father tore me down." Joseph glanced at me then, his eyes searching mine, but instead of remorse, I saw calculation. "If you want Dad to respect you, you're going to have to meet him halfway," he said carefully. "An apology would go a long way." If you just tell him you're sorry for overreacting, it'll smooth things over. That's the only way he'll ever accept you. I stared at him, my stomach twisting. You want me to apologize? After what he said to me, he nodded. It's not about who's right or wrong. It's about keeping the peace. My dad's stubborn. You'll never win by fighting him. Just swallow it this once, and things will get better. I shook my head slowly, feeling something inside me break. No, Joseph. I'm not apologizing for being disrespected. I won't beg for a man's approval who already decided I'm beneath him. If that's what it takes to fit into your family, then maybe I don't belong there. Silence filled the car. For the first time, I saw Joseph's face falter, his confidence slip. But in that same moment, I felt my own strength return. I realized our relationship wasn't just strained, it was crumbling right in front of us. And this time, I wasn't going to hold it together alone. It was only a few days after that disastrous dinner when Joseph showed up at my apartment. He brought flowers, the expensive kind wrapped in shiny paper, as if roses could cover the wounds his silence had left in. I let him in, but my heart felt guarded. We sat across from each other on the couch, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, Joseph cleared his throat and said, "Leah, I've been thinking a lot about us, about the future." His voice carried a kind of seriousness I hadn't heard before, and my chest tightened with unease. Then he looked me in the eye and said the words that froze me. "I want to marry you, but if you want Dad's blessing, you'll have to play along." For a second, I couldn't even breathe. My mind repeated his sentence over and over, each word twisting deeper. He wasn't asking me to marry him because he wanted me. He was asking me to mold myself into something his father would approve of. I stared at him, shocked. Play along? What does that even mean, Joseph? He sighed, as if I were being difficult. It means letting Dad see you respect him. Stop fighting back. Stop taking everything so personally. If you just show him you're willing to adapt, he'll come around. That's the only way this works. The betrayal hit like a wave. He wasn't defending me. He wasn't standing beside me. He was asking me to bow down, to swallow my pride, to prove myself to a man who had called me trash. My chest burned as I whispered, "So your father's approval matters more than how I feel? More than my dignity?" Joseph leaned forward, frustrated. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Don't you see? If you just compromise a little, we can have everything. A life together, a family security. Why throw it away over one dinner?" One dinner. My voice cracked, not from weakness but from anger. "Joseph, your father humiliated me, and you let him. Now you want me to apologize, to pretend it's fine, just so he can give us his blessing? That's not love. That's control." His face paled. "You're really going to walk away from this? From us? Over something so small." Small. That word told me everything I needed to know. My pain, my worth, my identity. He saw them as inconveniences. He wanted me to shrink myself just to fit into his father's perfect picture. I stood up, my hands trembling but my voice steady. "I'm not throwing away anything, Joseph. I'm choosing myself. I deserve respect, and if you can't give it, then there's nothing left between us." His eyes widened, shocked, as though he never believed I'd actually leave. But I walked to the door, opened it, and said quietly, "Goodbye." Tears stung my eyes as I stepped out into the cool night air, heartbroken but free. For the first time, I realized I would rather be alone than beg for the dignity I deserved. After walking away from Joseph, I felt like my world had cracked in two. For weeks, I carried the sting of betrayal like a shadow. But instead of letting it swallow me, I threw myself into the one thing I could control, my work. Event planning had always been more than just a job for me. It was a way of turning chaos into beauty, of creating memories people carried with them forever. So I buried myself in it, booking clients, chasing opportunities, and proving to myself that I didn't need anyone's approval to succeed. The long hours paid off. Word spread about the events I organized, smooth, elegant, and unforgettable. Couples, companies, even charities began seeking me out. Each new project reminded me I wasn't defined by Richard's cruel words or Joseph's weakness. I was defined by my own effort, my vision, and my results. Months passed, and one afternoon I got a call from a prestigious corporate office. They were planning their annual gala, one of the most anticipated events of the year, and wanted me to take charge. It was a dream assignment, big budget, high profile, the kind of event that could push my career into a new league. Without hesitation, I accepted. I met with their representatives, took notes, and began crafting a vision for the night. Glittering decor, flawless timing, and an atmosphere people would talk about long after it ended. I poured every ounce of my creativity into the plan, determined to make it perfect. It wasn't until I received the official contract that I noticed the client's full name. My stomach dropped. The gala wasn't just any corporate event. It was being hosted by Richard's company. For a moment, I just stared at the paper in disbelief. Out of all the clients I could have landed, fate had delivered this one into my hand. A memory flashed of Richard sneering across that dinner table, calling me street trash, like I was nothing. Now here I was, holding the reins to the most important night his company would host all year. A slow, steady fire built inside me. This wasn't just work anymore. This was my chance, not to scream, not to fight, not to lower myself to his cruelty, but to show him who I truly was. To let him see me succeed on a stage he couldn't ignore. So I didn't say a word about my connection. I kept my head down and worked harder than ever. Meetings, designs, rehearsals, every detail had to be flawless. I studied Richard's company, learned their style, their expectations, and built an event so seamless no one could find a single flaw. The best part? Richard had no idea I was behind it. The thought of his face when he walked into that ballroom and saw me in charge fueled me through every late night and early morning. I wasn't just planning a gala anymore. I was planning my revenge, and I was going to execute it with elegance, precision, and dignity. The night of the gala arrived, and the ballroom glowed like a scene from a dream. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, the tables were dressed in silk linens, and every detail was executed to perfection. The energy buzzed with importance. This was the kind of event where reputations were polished, where powerful hands shook, and where appearances meant everything. Richard walked in like he owned not just the company but the room itself. His suit was perfectly tailored, his smile wide as he greeted colleagues and investors. I watched from a distance at first, clipboard in hand, headset tucked discreetly in my ear. He strutted from table to table, telling stories about his business acumen, boasting about how his company represented excellence and class. He laughed loudly, clapped backs, and spoke as if the night itself existed to honor him. But then the moment came. It was time for me to step forward, not as Joseph's girlfriend, not as the woman Richard had once humiliated, but as the professional who had orchestrated every shining detail of the evening. I walked across the room with calm confidence, wearing a sleek gown instead of the modest dresses Richard had once mocked. My hair was pinned elegantly, my posture strong. I didn't need to demand attention. People naturally turned to look. When Richard finally noticed me, the smugness on his face faltered. He blinked, startled, as if I had stepped out of a nightmare he thought he'd buried. His voice caught slightly when he said, "Leah, what are you doing here?" I smiled politely, not missing a beat. "Good evening, Mr. Whitmore. I'm the event coordinator for tonight's gala. I hope everything meets your expectations." For the first time, I saw Richard speechless. He stammered, You organized this?" His eyes darted around the room, taking in the compliments flying about, the investors praising the ambience, the guests marveling at the seamless flow of the evening. "Yes," I replied evenly. "My team and I have been working for months to make sure this night reflects the excellence of your company." Guests nearby overheard the exchange, and several leaned in to commend me directly. One of Richard's business partners said, "You've outdone yourself, young lady. This is the best gala we've attended in years." Another chimed in, "Richard, you didn't tell us you had someone so talented on your team." Richard's jaw tightened. I could see the conflict in his eyes. He wanted to dismiss me, belittle me like before, but he couldn't. Not here. Not in front of all these people praising me. Any insult now would expose his arrogance, make him look petty and ungrateful. For once, he was trapped in silence. I kept my composure, thanking each guest with grace, never raising my voice, never gloating. The power had shifted without a single harsh word. Richard had wanted the world to see me as street trash. Instead, the world saw me as the woman who had made his company shine. It didn't take long before Richard tried to regain control of the night. I saw him moving toward me across the ballroom, his expression tight, as though he couldn't stand the sight of me being praised. He leaned in close enough so only I could hear and muttered with a smirk, "Funny to see you working. Guess some people never escape where they came from." I met his eyes steadily, my face calm. Inside, I felt the sting, but I had learned not to let him see it. I smiled politely and said, "Yes, it is funny. Some people inherit their position, and others work hard to earn theirs. I'll take the second path any day." For a moment, Richard froze, caught off guard. A couple of nearby colleagues glanced our way, curiosity lighting their faces. I could tell they had heard me. Richard tried to laugh it off, shaking his head as though I were amusing. "You've got quite the mouth, don't you?" That attitude might impress the small-time crowd, but in my world, respect is everything. I tilted my head slightly, keeping my voice calm but firm. Respect is important, but it isn't bought or demanded, it's earned. And tonight, people aren't talking about your money, Richard. They're talking about this event. My work. The subtle jab hit its mark. Richard's face flushed, his composure slipping. He straightened his shoulders, his voice rising a little too loudly now. "Don't fool yourself. People came here for my company, not for you. You're just the help." Gasps fluttered from the people nearby. Several of his colleagues turned sharply, eyes narrowing at his words. One whispered to another, "Did he really just say that?" Another shook their head, clearly unimpressed. I didn't need to raise my voice. His own anger was doing the work for me. I folded my hands lightly in front of me and replied, "If I'm just the help, then I suppose you should be grateful your help has everyone praising your company tonight." The words were delivered softly, but they landed with precision. Richard's eyes widened in fury, and he snapped, "Watch your tone with me." His voice boomed louder than he intended, echoing across the elegant hall. Heads turned. Conversations paused. A room full of investors and partners watched their proud host unravel in front of them. I remained still, my expression neutral, as though nothing was wrong. That contrast, his rage against my composure, only made him look worse. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Unprofessional. He's losing it. Can you believe how he's speaking to her?" The words floated across the ballroom, and I saw his colleagues exchanging looks of disapproval. The shine of authority Richard had carried into the room was slipping away, replaced by the image of a man too arrogant to hide his disdain. And the best part was, I hadn't raised my voice once. All I had to do was stand tall and let him destroy himself. A few days after the gala, my phone lit up with a number I hadn't seen in months. Joseph. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. Curiosity won, and I picked up. His voice came through low and careful, almost unsure. "Leah, it's me. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but please, just give me a minute." I didn't say anything, just waited. He took a shaky breath. "I saw what you did at the gala. Word got back to me. Everyone's talking about it, about you. Dad's reputation took a serious hit, and people can't stop praising how professional and graceful you are. I never realized how strong you are." There was a pause, and then his voice cracked slightly. "I regret everything, Leah. I regret not standing up for you that night. I should have defended you, I should have protected you, but I was too afraid of going against my father. I see it now, I see what I lost." My throat tightened, but not out of longing. It was anger mixed with sadness. I let him continue. "I want another chance," Joseph pleaded. "I promise things will be different this time. I'll defend you, I'll put you first. Please, just let me prove it to you. We can start over." For a moment, I closed my eyes. His words were ones I had wished for back then, on that horrible night. I had begged silently for him to stand up for me, to show me I mattered more than his father's approval. But now it felt empty. He hadn't realized my worth because he loved me. He realized it because I walked away, because his father's image cracked, because the world was finally applauding me. I drew in a slow breath, steadying my voice. "Joseph," I said quietly, "do you hear yourself? It took losing me for you to see my value. That's not love. That's regret." He tried to cut in, but I kept going. "When I needed you most, you stood by and let your father tear me apart. And now, when the damage is done, when the world finally respects me, you suddenly decide I'm worth fighting for? That's not about me. It's about you and your guilt." Silence filled the line. I could almost hear his heart breaking, but I didn't waver. "I don't need someone who only sees my worth after I'm gone. I need someone who never doubts it. And that's not you," Joseph whispered. "Leah, please." His voice cracked again, but I had already made my choice. "I wish you well, Joseph. Truly. But this chapter is closed." I ended the call and set the phone down, my chest heavy yet free. For the first time, I didn't feel like a girl waiting for his love. I felt like a woman who had finally reclaimed her dignity. And I wasn't going back. I often think back to that night at the dinner table, the moment Richard spat out the words "street trash," like I was beneath everyone sitting there. For weeks, those words replayed in my head like a cruel echo. I had left that night broken, humiliated, and questioning whether I belonged anywhere near Joseph's world. But now, standing at the end of this journey, I see things differently. That insult wasn't the end of me. It was the spark that pushed me to grow into the woman I am today. I didn't have to fight Richard with shouting or desperate pleas. I didn't have to beg Joseph to stand by me or wait for Diana's silent sympathy to turn into action. Instead, I turned my focus inward. I built myself, piece by piece, pouring every ounce of pain into my work until it bloomed into success. My dignity became my armor, my accomplishments my voice. And fate, with its quiet humor, brought everything full circle. Richard had to stand in a room filled with powerful people and watch me shine. He had to hear others speak my name with respect, admiration, and praise. He couldn't sneer at me without making himself look small. For once, I didn't feel like the outsider at his table. I was the one everyone turned to, the one in control. His pride took a blow he could never undo, and the irony was sweet. Joseph lost me long before that night, though it took him months to realize. When he begged for another chance, I saw clearly what I had refused to admit before. Love that only wakes up when it's too late isn't love at all. I walked away with no hesitation, not because I hated him, but because I finally loved myself enough to let go. And Richard? He'll go on protecting his wealth and his image, pretending the cracks don't show. But I know deep down he'll never forget me. He'll never forget the girl he once dismissed and the woman who proved him wrong in front of everyone he tried to impress. That wound to his pride will linger longer than any words I could have shouted at him. As for me, I stand taller now. I'm no longer the nervous young woman at a fancy dinner table, waiting to be accepted. I am the woman who carved her own space, on her own terms, without permission from anyone. Street trash? No. I am the woman he'll never be able to buy, break, or forget. And that is my triumph, not just surviving his insult, but rewriting the ending of my own story. I didn't just walk away with dignity, I walked away with power. And I'll never let anyone take that from me again. Do you believe Leah made the right choice by walking away from Joseph and his family for good? Or should she have given him another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And if you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit subscribe and tap the notification bell so you won't miss the next one.